I think we're so trained to look at love as, can I love you forever? And if not, let me just turn this off.
Right.
Because again, we're afraid of the power and the enormity of love. We feel like it's foolish. We feel like it's like that like little girl in us, But at the same time, think about all of the lovers that you could have had that could have taught you different things and brought you to different places, but you just said no.
I think that is one of the things that we have to give ourselves to, that the risk that is in front of me, while it may very well lead me to heartbreak, I'm still willing to choose it, because the potential reward of even that moment of being seen and being known and being loved is worth it.
Yeah, that's what life is about.
Trust flow, surrender, let go. Trust flow, surrender, let go. Trust flow, surrender, let go. I'm the one I've been waiting for.
Welcome back to the Highest Self podcast. My name is Sahara Rose, and on this podcast, I love to take spiritual concepts, matters of the heart, and really break them down, because I feel like our society has a major love epidemic right now. It's something I've witnessed firsthand over the past year of being single and experiencing dates and heartbreaks and false hopes and like huge moments of WTF is happening, because I'm a certified lover girl by heart, but it ain't easy in 2024. So last year, fresh out of my divorce, I had this beautiful soul on the podcast, Rainier. I'm going to link the episode below. It was so good. We were talking about romance and just the need for it in our society. And here we are now, flash forward a year, and he has a book coming out, and this book is about the other side sometimes of falling in love, which is leaving love, and how equally important that is. We really romanticize that, like, you meet someone and you're so excited and you don't know where it's going to go, but you can't have those beginnings without those endings. And if there's anything I've learned from this year, is sometimes the endings are the greatest blessings of your life. And sometimes if you don't have the courage to leave a relationship, God will do it for you. And that's really what I experienced, and that who you are meant to become is on the other side of experiencing what was your biggest nightmare at that time, because you needed to experience that to realize that not only will you survive it, but you will actually become the version of you that you fall in love with. So this episode, I hope I don't cry my pretty makeup on. By the way, this is my first ever episode in my new home studio. Guys, I went on a fucking journey this year, lived all over the place. I was like, I'm going to live in Portugal. Now I'm going to live in London. My place gets broken in London. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to stop traveling and create my own home base. And this is my first time ever in 7+ years of podcasting having my own home studio. I started this podcast literally at my grandma's house on a $16 microphone, just like looking out the window and like just talking about random things, thinking, I'm not even doing this for anyone to listen. I just feel like having these conversations. And here we are now. Like, I have a second bedroom. Even that's just fucking cool, and with a neon sign. So these are the kind of things that would have never happened had I not left the relationship. And sometimes the love story is really about you. And before we drop into this episode, be sure to hit subscribe wherever you're listening to this podcast. That is the best way to stay up to date on the latest episodes. We've got this in video format, so if you're just hearing my voice, be sure to also watch our fabulous outfits on video as well on Spotify, YouTube, or the Apple Store. This is the best way to stay in the flow with future conversations, and also allows the podcast to reach more people. So hit subscribe so I can keep vibing with you on all future episodes. Now let's get into this one. So, without further ado, let's welcome Rainier to the Highest Self podcast.
Oh my God. I am so honored to be the first guest in this amazing space.
So fitting.
Wow. And to get to be back at all is just my privilege.
So before we get into this, I always ask you what makes you your highest self, but I feel like I want to ask you what really awakens your heart?
Well, I got to tell you, this last year has just been such a humdinger for me. And part of this has to do with the book that we're going to talk about. But you talk about like what awakens my heart. My father died almost a year ago this month. And talk about an awakening. whenever you experience a real passage like that, and you're not numb to it, and you're not anesthetized to that impact on your heart, that's an awakening. That sense of opening and closing, kind of that breathing space of love. What I realized was it takes an immense amount of courage to just get up in the morning some days. My sister, after my father's death, she called like 2 weeks later, said, "How are you doing with it all?" And I said, "I'm just laying in the bathtub drinking whiskey most days." And we both kind of laughed because it was true. What I discovered in all of this is that joy and grief are so intimately wrapped up together. So you talk about what awakens your heart. Well, joy, doesn't it, for all of us? Oh my God, we love to feel joy. But joy and grief? No, thank you. I want to cut away the grief. But what I realized is the real awakener is when we allow them to live together. I mean, joy and grief are twin brothers locked in this wrestling match. They can't keep their hands off of each other. And we need to actually accept both of them together. I mean, they're pounding on us anyway. So the sooner we accept that twin reality of these, the more we can be open, I think, to the experience of living fully. Yeah.
So I feel like there's this like prevalent belief in the spiritual community of, I want life to be easy. I want to live in a state of effortless ease, very Abraham Hicks, I'm just going to manifest my perfect reality. And so when people listen to, oh, you got to have grief, they're like, I don't want the grief part. No. Cut that away. I'm going to manifest my way above that. But I feel what that does is it closes our hearts. And I feel that so many of us, we're so afraid of having our hearts broken again that we say we want love, but we're not willing to put ourselves at the line that is required for love. So how can one who's experienced deep heartbreak begin to build the pathway back to opening their heart?
Well, I mean, you just went for the jugular. I mean, that's the $1 million question.
The essential question of life.
How can we work this all out again? Well, first of all, I would say there's no bypassing the human condition.
Yeah.
You cannot escape this being human business. And we want to manifest our way out of it. Oh, wouldn't it be delightful if we could actually just escape it all, become aliens, become Martians on some transcended planet, somewhere else. I was dealing with someone recently and they said, I prefer other planets to Earth. I prefer aliens to humans. I prefer animals to us too. And I thought, oh, you're not my people. What I prefer are the gritty moments of life, the tangible, touchable situations that occur in which real change happens. You cannot manifest your way out of heartbreak. Think of it. Every lover leaves. Every person, and then every relationship extends in either death or divorce, one way or the other. I mean, I hate to be gruesome about it, but that actually is the prognosis. I mean, this life is a terminal illness. And the sooner we recognize that none of us are making it out alive, then we can get on with the good stuff of loving. So I actually have to understand that heartbreak is wrapped up in this. And that heartbreak actually opens my heart. Oh, everyone's running around saying, I want my heart to be open. I want my chakras to be open. Oh my gosh. Do you know how that happens? It has to be shattered into 1,000 pieces. That's how we open our hearts over and over and over. We risk. Actually, I love what you said that this podcast started, in your grandma's house, was it? And this $16 mic. Yeah. And that's it. You threw yourself into the moment, not knowing where it would go. It could have ended in miserable failure. And maybe there's even been moments when you've been really up against the wall. But all things considered, you keep taking the next step. I mean, thus is podcasts, thus is life, thus is love. That's it. It's showing up to the next step. No matter how chintzy or cheap or expensive, I give my all to this next present moment.
It's so true. And it's something that like only when you're in it can you really experience it. Like I remember in the throes of right after my divorce, which was, like I mentioned, a sudden divorce that happened as a result of a very big betrayal. And it was like complete, just my life was thrown upside down. I didn't know what to believe. I couldn't trust myself, just the levels of feeling just so gaslit and confused. And I had never fully had like an on my knees moment like I had with that, of just like when life just like, and that was ultimately when I understood what surrender meant. Like before that, it was just a concept, but to just be like, I have no fucking idea what to do next. I don't know where I'm going to live, like all of these things, how to go through a divorce, let alone. And it's like, and I surrender. And I know this is happening for something greater than me. And then you just pick up the next piece, the next piece, the next piece, the next piece. And the greatest gift of it is the aliveness that it gave me on the other side, of just the ability to feel. And I wouldn't give that up for anything, because now I can see how I was like operating from, let's say, the radio spectrum of like 800 to 1200. And now it's like 0 to 10,000, you know, and that just makes you feel everything more, right?
That's
it's
right.
Like, I laugh and cry on a daily basis, you know, it's just like, and what you said about it's like something about the mornings, like, you know, you heal when you stop crying when you wake up.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You know, why is it the mornings?
You know, it's interesting. There's a poem in the book where I talk about that I wake up early in the mornings just to imagine us dreaming together. And I remember kind of that feeling, whether it's been a lover who's left or great love, such as my father who was lost. But that feeling of waking up very early in the morning, can't I just sleep? But no, those are the beautiful, quiet moments actually where you are closest to that thing. Pablo Neruda, the great poet, he said her eyes were full of absence. I love that, like the whimsy and nostalgia. He's saying the thing I fell in love with was that she was somewhere else. And I think that that's so profound that actually, like, we kind of love those shimmering experiences we can't quite hold on to. Like when a lover leaves us, there is a special sweetness to that. And I didn't understand it fully. I have to be honest. About a month after the passage of my father, I was crying in a bar with my close friend who had lost his father a year earlier. And I said, does this end? Does this sadness ever end? He said, well, the acute pain will go away, but enjoy it. It is a fine caviar you will never have happen again. He's not wrong. You know, a year later, you don't wake up so early in the morning. The acute pain is dissipated somewhat. That caviar has been taken away and someone else will dine on it. Enjoy it while it's here. Your job as a human is to have the human experience. You were not given a Martian's life. You were given this life. Live it.
Yeah, like when you're in it though, I remember I'm like, I can't wait until it's been 1 month. Yeah. Like once it's been 1 month, things will be easier. And then it's 1 month and you're still so fucking miserable. And then I'm like, it's the 3 month mark. That's what they say. The 3 months I make it past that. It's like, no, okay. It's the 6 month mark. And then the 1 year. And it's like, and I think grief never fully goes away.
Yeah. I've got a scar on my hand here, and it's actually a fairly large scar. And what happened was one October, I was going to make red curry. Seemed like a real good idea. It was actually Halloween. And I opened the can of red curry paste and, well, I didn't open the can fully and I sliced my hand pretty good. So I pick up my daughter at the time and whisk her down to the hospital. And, you know, they stitched up this hand. And about a week later, my hand started to swell uncontrollably. Had to go back to the hospital. Turns out they hadn't cleaned out the wound sufficiently. It gets cleaned out again, restitched up, all the things. I didn't sue the hospital. I probably should have, but I didn't think to. But this has always been a great illustration to me. Like, unless we're with the pain sufficiently in the beginning, unless we clean out that wound sufficiently, unless we experience it, so to speak, actually, you reopen it up. You rewound yourself later down the road. Healing starts to happen when we allow ourselves to be fully in the experience. And that's what the cleaning out process is. If you're too eager to sew it up too fast, you actually miss the healing.
So I feel like during the holidays, it's actually the best time to focus on the thing that you've been putting off. So for lots of you guys, it's speaking, whether it's one day creating your own podcast like this, please have me on, or speaking on stages, writing books, creating social media content, creating a personal brand around your wisdom. But for a lot of us, the speaking part is a little bit scary. We stutter. We feel like we're not good at telling stories. We lose people. We just don't have that confidence to show up on camera the way that we want to. But you know that you have an important message to share. So if this is you, I'm really excited that my course, Speak with Soul, is available for 25% off this week only. So this is my flagship course that has taken thousands of people from awkward to confident speaker in just 21 days. I mean, if you check out the testimonials, people are like getting on the news, they're launching podcasts, they're getting keynote engagements. It is insane to see the transformations that are happening. People who've never spoken before, and also people who are like on their A game, who just take it up a notch. Speaking is my forte. I love doing it. I've been doing this podcast for over 7 years, and I've learned a thing or two about telling the story, the tone, texture, quality of your voice, and getting your message across in a way that anchors into people's hearts, because we don't need any more of this like super cerebral TED talk of like, hey, I have a vision and listen to me, point A to B. But like instead to actually feel like you're having a conversation with someone in a way that's also educational and resonates. So if you're interested, you're curious, take advantage of 25% off at speakwithsoulcourse.com with coupon code SWS25. That's speakwithsoulcourse.com with coupon code SWS25. You can find all of that in the show notes. Fluffing up my aura, my radiance on fleek. Glow every aura, you know I'm doing me. So this is going to be your new mantra when you're kind of like feeling a little bit down. You want to fluff your radiance back up because, girl, you are sparkly AF and you deserve to feel like it. You deserve your music to remind you of it. You deserve your outfits to be the embodiment of it. And that's really what the frequency of my new album, My Body is an Altar, is all about. So these are all songs that I produced, wrote, and performed that are really for the embodied baby girl. So you're listening to the song Glow Every Aura right now, which is my personal favorite to jam out to. There's the most insane verse by this Jamaican guy, Devin Dodaka. He literally sounds like Sean Paul. So if you have been calling in high vibrational music with beats that are just like dirty, sucio, that make you want to suéltalo, this is the album for you. So you can listen to it on Spotify, Apple Music, watch the music video for My Body's an Altar on YouTube, tune in on SoundCloud, wherever you listen to music. I am so excited to see it make its way, shape, and form into your life. I want to see some reels of you fluffing up your aura because your radiance on fleek. You glow every aura because you know you're doing you. So be sure to stream it over at the link in bio, and I am so excited to see you dance to it, rock out to it, and make it your own. Yeah, the intelligence of like letting yourself like fully break down and be in that. And I think our society, we glamorize like the breakthrough.
Yeah.
And we like instantly want to go into like, what are the lessons I learned? And like, how am I moving forward? And especially when love is taken away from us, we're like, you know, what I see happen a lot of women going through divorces and breakups is oftentimes the relationship didn't have a lot of love and intimacy. So as soon as it's done, you're like, I want the love, you know, and we were just talking about the concept of like limerence, of you just project that love on someone, this fantasy of this is the kind of person that will make all of this heartbreak worth it if I end up with someone like this.
Yeah.
And then it's a mirage that we continue to chase and we continue to tie our worth to. Because I think it's, so for someone who's like in it right now, they're in the caviar, but it doesn't feel like caviar, of just like, it's my constant thoughts. Like it's hard to have a normal conversation that's not about this grief. What wisdom do you have for them now being a year out of it?
First of all, I would say whatever that grief is, you have to allow yourself to fully experience it. Now, what that doesn't actually mean is drowning in it. Like letting it flow through you means letting your experience happen, but know that grief, like all emotions, is a rapid experience. Like I may have grief in the next 12 minutes. I might break down crying. Actually, earlier today on the way, I was reading the intro to the book, and I felt the clutch in the back of my throat, and my tears started to fall. My friend who was driving the car, he almost lost control of the car. He was crying too. We were both sitting there sobbing at the intro to it. And you're back at that grief moment. But the truth is, 12 minutes in, it dissipated. So one of the ways we need to experience emotions is to show up to them honestly, right? Have the emotion and let the emotion pass. Emotions aren't supposed to be a swamp where you just pool in them, right? You're actually supposed to be in the river of them. So I let it flow into me. I let it flow out of me. Yeah. And then I move on. Mm-hmm. And I know that a little later it will come in and go out again. Last year I stood in, I think, 4 different continents, 12 different countries, 17 different cities. All the joy you could experience is pounded into a year. And I also wept on all 3 of those great seashores. I cried in multiple cathedrals. I let the joy and the grief intertwine. When you read these stories in this book, I firmly resist the notion this is a sad book. Like, there are beginnings wrapped up in it. Oh my God, there's this one story, and I was reminded of it, of a woman who falls in love with the loss prevention security guard. And she does so by calling him every time jewelry is stolen from her store. And she hears the safe voice on the other end of the line. Hello, ma'am. May I take the events of what happened? Yes. And so she falls in love with this very safe, secure presence. The only problem is she's married at the time. And of course, as happens, sometimes the marriage is a particularly poor one. Her needs aren't cared for. She feels neglected, maybe even abused. And contrast that with this reassuring presence on the other end of the line. The story kind of climaxes with him saying, do you want to meet for coffee? And she says, oh my God, I don't know if I should. But then she does. She goes, she meets him for coffee. Her hands are trembling. She spills the coffee. She's nervous. He cleans it up. And then he looks at her and she says, in a grip of the moment, time stood still. And he said, are you happy? Now, these are strangers, ostensibly strangers. But in that moment, everything shifted in her life. This is a true story. Many of the stories in this book are true stories. This is a true story. And everything changed for her in that moment. What does that mean? Well, it means that love's beginnings and love's endings are intimately wrapped up. I have no clue what happened next. Not really. We could only guess. Love happens outside in the backyards and the fields beyond the streets of right and wrong. Yeah. And so this beautiful encounter, this beginning might happen wrapped up in these unseemly endings. We protest the endings, but we love the beginnings. The truth is they go together. So if you're in an ending right now, know this too shall pass. Of course, if you're in a beginning right now, know this too shall pass. Either way.
So well said. So your writing is so beautiful. I want you to read some. I was sending you some screenshots. I'm like, oh my God, this is so beautiful. But a couple of just the words that you shared. One thing you said, and I'll let you read whatever you desire to share, but you wrote this quote: we don't manifest love. Love manifests us. She summons us, crashes in, and makes a mess of our well-ordered world. You can't call in love, but don't ignore her when she calls you.
Boy, I have to tell you, if those just aren't the most true words, I would argue the single most salient characteristic of love is its inevitability.
That gives me hope.
It does not require your consent. It will simply come calling. Love is not a gentleman, right? It will call your name, even though you do your best to tune it out, I think. I certainly have in my lifetime tried to tune it out over and over. Now, the interesting thing is it will keep calling your name even after you ignore it. And you might ignore it in this person, you might ignore it in that person, you might ignore it in that person, and you might even give up hope for love, but love keeps whispering. I think that's the beauty of it. We think that we can create, control, contrive love. We have all of these boxes that they check and the lists. The truth is, you can't predict it. I mean, love is not a controlled burn.
Do you think love is a soul contract between two specific people that you two will fall in love at some point? Or do you think it's more we become ready for love and then based on who's around us, we play the love game with them?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I certainly do think that the people we summon into our lives are familiar presences. I mean, I don't have to start in a past lifetime to say that. I mean, I can just say that my childhood has pretty conditioned me to choose who walks into my life. I mean, my partner and I were the lock to each other's key, or the key to each other's locks, however you say it. Like, the reality is that we were so perfectly paired for each other. Her avoidance met my anxiety so perfectly.
Gotta love it.
Right. And so what are we? We're each other's teachers. We had this hammered into us in a particularly dark moment of our life. I like to tell this dark moment just to tell people that you can get out of dark moments. But I had confessed that I was unfaithful to my partner. And in fact, I shared that in the last episode that you and I were on together. This was a really powerful moment of authenticity. It was also a very dark moment, as anyone can imagine, who's both said that and had that said to them. You know, being on my side of it, I was standing there watching everything, all the plates that had been in the air crash down around me. I knew that in the telling of that truth, I was probably going to lose everything. That's how it felt. And she knew in the hearing of it that the life that she had become accustomed to was changed in a moment and taken away from her, maybe even made foolish. It's a very decimating moment. You talk about eternity squeezed into an instant. You're watching your entire life flash before your eyes. Everything's eroded. Yeah. And I know that you stood there, you know, it's like, oh my God, how we've all kind of been there in some way or another.
Literally time freezes.
Right. Time stops. And that's what happened. Well, that night, she stays in the bedroom and I stay on the couch. And I hear her sobbing in the middle of the night. And then she says, will you come in here? So of course I do. And she says, will you kneel beside the bed? And I did. And she says, will you hold my hand? So of course I do. And then she says, will you just get on the bed with me? I do. And then she says, will you just hold me? I mean, these are the unexplainable moments. Why did she choose to do that? And could I have responded differently? But I didn't. And in that moment, you know, the masks are off. We're laying there. It's really probably the first time I've ever authentically held her, and she's authentically been held by me with our masks gone. Now, it could have spun out then, but here's the humor of this. The next day, we're at the beach, feeling real low, real dark. And we're walking down this gray Pacific Northwest coastline, feeling about as drab as it looked. When all of a sudden a man who is shirtless, long scraggly hair, runs by us. And he's like doing like a personal jog dance, like kind of a Richard Simmons thing, like to like music that he's making, like, and it is a very odd moment. Like, we're feeling very down and he is feeling very up. And then as he runs by us, he turns around. So now he's running backwards and he looks at us and he says, why so glum, guys? Now, I don't know if this is something you should say to people who look very down as a couple, but he says it. He went there, and it was so humorous to both of us in that moment. We kind of like cracking up, but he says, what's wrong? Don't you two know that you're each other's teachers? Now, I have to say, if we were people who were a little sharper and edgier, we might have said, you know, screw off, buddy. But it was about the biggest truth of our life in that moment. It was an angel unaware kind of moment. That was like one of those incredible truths that this ridiculously happy gentleman shared with us in that moment, that we were each other's teachers. And I was summoned, so to speak, out of all of the history that she needed to process through. And she was summoned, so to speak, to process through all the history I needed to. And in that moment, we committed, I think, to becoming one another's tutors, mentors in this game of life, this thing called love. Not easy, But if you can, as lovers, decide, no, I have conscripted you to become my teacher. What are you here? What are you proficient in that I need? It's really the thing we think.
It's so true because should you take it as the opportunity, it can be the opportunity to do all of the shadow work that you would have never done without something like this that's this big. But not everyone takes that choice. That's what I've learned.
Yeah.
Like for me, after that happened in my divorce, I was like, how was I in this relationship? How did I not know? What was my childhood? What was my ancestry? Like I went so deep, and not everyone does that, So what is it that, and how can we, because I'm assuming people listening to this, they want to dive deep. How can we, whether we choose to stay with this person or not, really not, I think what happens, especially around the concept of infidelity, is like, screw that person. I remember one of the first books I read, and it was like, leave a cheater. It was like something like that. And it was like, they are the worst people on earth and they are all sociopaths, and just get away from all of them. And I was like, it's very easy to take that perspective, but I also am like, okay, how was I in this dynamic? What's my role? And then it's also easy to go the other end and be like, I'm responsible for it, which you're also not responsible. So what advice do you have for someone who's in a situation like this to really dive into, how can I heal what's in me that allowed me to be in this dynamic without then taking it on as your problem, it is your life's work. It is, but I think we can self-punish ourselves with it as well.
Well, and I think if my partner were here, she would have her own very unique take on this, because she had to do her work around that. And that was the set of choices she made in that moment. But I think, first of all, what I would say is, whether you stay or go, inconsequential, you're going to have to do the work, no matter what, of confronting those wounded places in yourself, whichever side of things you're on. So I can only speak about my experience within that moment. It was so important for me to see the pain I had caused. I think that's one thing that we sometimes leave. In that situation, it would have been very easy for her to leave or me to leave. And if that would have happened, I can say, at least in my experience, I might not have gotten to see close up the pain that I had caused this person I loved. But instead, still, I have the weeping in my ears ringing. Still, she texted me today. We're still together, and many years later. And she said, "Oh, I miss you. When are you coming back?" And I've been gone for a bit on these things. And I said, "Oh, I don't like causing you sadness." You know how many years it's taken to have that low threshold of, I don't want to cause this person pain. But had I not seen that direct impact, I might not have gotten there. So it was a growth curve for me. So I think that one of the things, again, if we're talking about how to live in reality as it is, I actually have to, one, show up to my authentic experience. I can't bypass it. Going back to our conversation earlier, I have to show up to my grief. I have to show up to my despair. I have to show up to my pain. Two, I have to potentially, at least I have the option to describe it. Use my words, especially if I'm in relationship. The pain that I'm experiencing right now is, Mary Oliver says, "Tell me of your despair, I'll tell you of mine." And I think that that actually is the core of the beginning of relationship, that I listen to you. She also, within this, had to experience something. And for her, she would later recount, like, it was so important to understand her complicity in creating those situations, which honestly, I would have never said, "Oh, you should meditate on this set of thoughts." Listen, I am the first to say I was not great. But for her, that became an important set of questions. As you kind of said, my ancestry, I want to look at, where did I come from that would have made me tolerate that behavior? Why would I have, all of these things? So both of us began to show up to our own selves with radical authenticity. This is what my experience is. This is who I am in the world. This is what's going on. And then we began to show up in such a way where we listened to one another, not just the parts we liked. I would say that 1-2 step of self-acceptance and authenticity to the other person is so necessary, potentially, to get through those moments. I also want to say another thing. Not everyone should stay. Just like I would say, not everyone should leave.
Yeah.
But not everyone should stay. Some people hear our story, which we had our own podcast dedicated to this, Love Like Hell, where we detail this journey of ours. A lot of people come away saying, oh my God, there's hope. Thank God there's hope. And well, there is, but you actually have to have two willing parties. So one thing I do want to say is the condition for that, you actually have to have two people who really are willing to make it work. And if you're not, and you do have to know yourself, you have to say, actually, I'm not available to that journey. That's not where I am. That's not the path that I need to be on right now. You need to be honest about that with yourself first and foremost.
I think there's this beautiful moment that happens after infidelity, a breakup, a decision to divorce, where you're so honest with each other for the first time because the veil is gone and you're no longer trying to woo this person over or put your best face forward, that you can just say all the things that you would have never said and it's a death. Whether you choose to stay in that relationship or not, that relationship is done.
Yeah.
And it's a rude fucking awakening, but some of the best conversations I ever had with my ex were in those few days afterwards. Like, here's what I was really feeling about this thing the whole time. Here's where and you could like actually just like, you're seeing a person for the first time in your life, you know? And if only we could start a relationship like that, you know, if only we could start a relationship with such honesty of like, here are my wounds and here are my triggers and here's my shadows. But at the beginning of a relationship, we want the love so badly that we're like, well, if I tell you all of these things, you might not love me. And then I won't get to be in love. And I really want to be in love. So how do we start a relationship with honesty when there is that natural inclination to put our best foot forward?
Yeah, you know, this book is divided into two halves, endings and beginnings. So even though I firmly maintain that they are wrapped up into each other, I in part tell the stories. They are separate events. Every beginning starts with an ending, though. So we start with endings first. But I think that what you're describing is like, well, again, maybe part of that, how do I shortcut the natural processes of developmental? You know, like part of development is I am so entwined with that merging process. I don't see them. I don't think you can actually. Do you think
that's supposed to just happen?
I think it's going to happen, whether it's supposed to happen or not. Like the urge to merge is so high that I'm
urge to merge. I love that.
It's like I dissolve into them, and you can say, "Oh, I shouldn't call them back. Oh, I shouldn't text them immediately," and pump the brakes. Yes, don't go off the cliff quite so soon, but also know that you're driving on ice. You're going to slide in there no matter what. Part of your job in the first stages of love is merging. The next stage of love develops. What is that? Well, part of that is negotiation. You know, there is a going theory these days that we either have compatibility or we don't. And I firmly maintain that compatibility is created. We create compatibility through our willingness to negotiate. I bring myself to the table, my wants, my desires, my truths, and you do the same. And we begin to have a dialogue of experiences. The first stage is chemistry. You either merge or you don't. The second stage is a collaborative process. It's teased out over time. A lot of us want to skip that stage and just get straight to the good stuff. But you need that prolonged negotiation. Where I see how you are and I see if I can live with it. What can I tolerate? What can't I tolerate? What do I need more of? What do I need less of? And who are you? I think a great question is, can I live with it?
If you are looking for some gorgeous herbs to amp up your self-care, look no further than Anima Mundi Herbals. So they are eco-friendly, certified organic, wild-crafted, and sustainably harvested plants and herbs made in a vegan and gluten-free lab. The founder, Adriana, who's one of my friends, is a Costa Rican herbalist, and she is committed to putting in zero fillers, binders, or flow agents. They have over 200 different herbs in their apothecary from around the world. My Personal favorites and go-tos are their mucuna, which is the dopamine bean, their rose, which is so beautiful for creating more softness and ease and beauty in your life. Plus they have ashwagandha, all these beautiful Ayurvedic herbs, traditional Chinese medicine herbs, and so much more. So if you want to get your hands on some, head over to animamundiherbals.com and use coupon code Sahara15 for 15% off. That's Anima, A-N-I-M-A, Mundi, M-U-N-D-I, herbals.com with coupon code Sahara15 for 15% off. And you can find that link and code in the show notes.
So trust your intuition, trust your inner wisdom, trust your inner guidance, close your eyes and listen.
I'm amazed by the people who are strong enough to walk away.
Right.
You know, I'm like, I'm in love. I'm staying in this, you know, like.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I'm all in.
And like people who are like, yeah, I really love everything about him, but like his breath. I'm like, what? You know?
Man, there was a girl, this is an embarrassing moment, who had clunky brown shoes, and I broke up with her because of the clunky brown shoes, if I'm really honest. And that probably wasn't a great moment when I was 18, but that was like a Seinfeld moment, you know? And so you can actually be very avoidant in love. You're nitpicky. You're trying to, again, avoid.
I have friends that are he needs to be, his face is not symmetrical enough. He's not tall enough. He's not this. I'm like, are you a model scout or are you looking for, but it's our fear. It's our protection mechanism, you know? And so, yeah. So for those of us who tend to be more on the lover girl, lover boy side, or just like that desire to merge is so strong and you love, but then sometimes it makes you just see love and maybe I won't even say, I think that even like, what is a red flag really?
Well, first of all, we all have red flags,
Right.
and red flags are incredibly subjective. Now, that having been said, there's probably some crimson flags, right? Like, can they talk about their emotions? I would actually say that today in a modern culture, we need to be able to communicate what we're thinking and feeling.
Yes.
So someone who's not revealing themselves, not showing up and sharing who they are, not actually describing what's going on in their world, that to me is a red flag.
I think a lot of us don't do that though because of these like seduction games. You know, like it's huge on Instagram right now,
Yeah.
this dark femme, which they've turned it into kind of like the art of seduction thing. And I know men have their own The Game or whatever
Right.
else. So I feel like people are trained not to say how they feel because they're afraid if I say how I feel, I'm going to come off as too needy, too much,
Right.
and you're going to run away from me. And I would much rather be the one who's being pursued and you the one chased. But then both people, men and women I see today, are wanting to be pursued. And then love doesn't have a chance to happen.
We've got to stop playing games with each other. I mean, there's this joke that is a really ridiculous joke that Osho used to tell. And,
Love Osho.
Osho. And it's kind of a humorous one. I'm sure he didn't invent it, but of an elderly couple who show up to a doctor's office and they say, "Doctor, we are concerned that we're not having sex in the right way. Would you observe us?" And so the doctor, this is highly unusual, but okay. And so they pay their $15 copay and they make love in front of him. Doctor says, "Hey guys, it all checks out. I think this is great. Good job. You know, you guys are in your 70s, but it's all working." So, well, the next week they come back and they say, "Well, we're unconvinced. We feel like there's something wrong. Would you mind taking another peek?" And so they pay their $15 copay and the doctor says, "No, I feel like you guys are doing it." Well, third week, show up, they pay the $15 copay. The doctor says, "Guys, in good conscience, I'm not available to this. What gives?" And the gentleman said, "Well, here's the deal. She can't come to my place because I live with my kids. I can't go to her retirement home because all the orderlies are nosy. This place is cheaper than a hotel, so we just pay the $15 copay." Now, could you imagine being so contrived, so absolutely conniving? How ridiculous. And most of us are that way in love.
I thought you were going to say they were getting off on being watched.
Well, hey, that also might be their kink. But I think like the reality is like a lot of us are playing games with love. Stop being so contrived.
Yeah.
Stop actually contriving love. Instead, show up to it.
But what is a game even? Like, okay, for example, you said, pump the brakes. Don't text so fast. I'm someone, I see a text, I respond to it instantly.
Yeah. I actually think that's the right move. When I say like, we say pump the brakes, we say we should slow down. I actually don't think you're going to be able to. I think it's good to like remember you don't know this person. Don't elevate them to a main character status when they haven't auditioned yet. Like you need to probably.
Isn't that so funny how we do that? That we're like, you meet someone and then you're like changing plans for the next few months of your life, expecting this thing to work when like you just might not even be talking in 1 week. But I think we're just all so excited about the possibility of there being this like main character person in our lives.
I think one of the things we have to confront is that a lot of us are not engaged with the other person. We're addicted to the process of emotional intensity. This is something increasingly I think about how it has played out in my life and how I observe it play out for so many others. I think there's 3 distinct stages to emotional intensity in this addiction. And it almost always starts the same for me. And let's see if it plays out this way for you. So you meet someone, it's a pretty decent contact, and maybe you're bandying text around, or maybe you've met up, or maybe you've had a FaceTime. But inevitably, you drop in this moment, and this is the statement that really suckers me in. Who are you? What is this? Oh my God.
What planet are you from?
What planet? Yeah. What species are you?
Yes.
And all of a sudden you begin to see possibility. In fact, what you fall for in that moment is the possibility of the relationship. So that becomes the first stage of emotional intensity. And if you can think about it this way, you sub out the real person for a potential relationship connection. And you become very excited. You borrow against a potential future to create excitement in the moment. Oh my God, Mom, he's just like Dad. Can you believe it? I really think this is going somewhere. And all of your enthusiasm is future oriented. What I would say is that is a fairly expensive fuel. If you're thinking of it in terms of burning fuels, that fuel, positive possibility, is actually pretty rare and pretty costly. You'll burn through it. So then you go looking for a cheaper source. Enter the second stage of emotional intensity addiction. What we really need to do is problem solve. I mean, you're on the other side of the country, or our parents are against us, or name the problem. We then begin to get off on solving problems. That now becomes the new source of emotional intensity. Oh my God. Oh, and then when we figured it out, it felt so good. I'm the rescuer, or she's the rescuer, you name it, and it feels good. And that is a pretty good fuel source for a really long time. A lot of couples are locked in the problem-solving phase. But you know what? That fuel source also eventually burns. Enter the third stage. This is the cheapest fuel, the most abundant fuel. Pathology. Who the hell are they? They're awful. My God, what planet are they from? All the butterflies of the first stage now are the fire-breathing dragons. You know, like, how could they do this? I conscripted them to teach me how to be chill, and come to find out they're lazy, you know, and all of a sudden, everything that looked so cute in the beginning is gross and abominable, and we pathologize them and they pathologize us. And you know what? That emotional intensity, while we would never say it feels good, is actually still part of the addiction. It feeds our need to keep the intensity going. Do you know what's interesting? At no point in that 3-stage cycle have we seen the person we're in connection with. How do we get off of it? Well, we get off of it by looking at the person as they really are, not the potential, not the problem to solve, and not the pathology. And for most of us, if we're really honest, that's too expensive. That's too costly a process. And so we usually end those relationships and then go looking for the next high to fill the void with.
So I have a question for you. When you say look at them as they really are, I feel like then that puts us into the, do they fit my list, my perfect guy list? So then if they don't, well, it's like kind of no one ever does.
It's true. And again, we get into that compatibility. I think part of the thing is I'm seeing them as they are, but I'm also owning up to who I am. So that's that moment I described a few, instances ago where it's like, I'm seeing my partner for the first time. She's seeing me. It usually happens when things fall apart. Mm-hmm. At the very point of the process where I could pathologize them, instead I see them as a person. a person who had unique experiences, a person who is going through something right now. I take the most generous view of who I'm sitting across from, while at the same time taking the most generous view of myself.
Yeah.
And so in that compassionate
But can you
engagement,
even fall in love from that place?
if we're going to fall,
Like if I look at them, I'm like, yeah, this person is this problem, that problem, that problem. I think the love, you get the ick.
yeah. Well, and I'll just be really honest. I've only had it happen once, really. And that's the situation I just described to you.
That you saw all of them, including their shadows, and then continued to fall in love.
And leaned in. So it can happen. I would also say it's pretty rare.
Yeah.
I think it takes a great degree of awareness. I think it also takes a great degree of commitment and willingness to yourself, to your own process, to keep the lights on inside and not to go back to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
I think not everyone is ready for that. Nor should we be. Like sometimes we just want the feeling again.
Do you think that like a situationship can work where you see this person and you're like, well, yeah, I can see who you really are. And you're not someone that I see myself with forever, but there's a love, there's an attraction here. So let's explore it for however long it feels good. Do you think that we can actually like stay in that and end it cleanly? Or do you think it just kind of ends up in this like one person's eventually going to want a relationship and the other person isn't, and then it ends up even more heartbreaking because you're kind of mourning the loss of what could have been?
Maybe. And to be honest, I don't have a great answer for that particular question, but what I want to actually say is either one conditions a potential positive or perfect outcome in which we stay together forever and we have the most amazing relationship. And what I would say is let's just call a spade and say, you can't escape heartbreak. Mm-hmm. Either the situationship ends or it doesn't. We get married. We have the 2.5 babies. We raise a wonderful poodle hybrid together. We love each other. We move to another country. We live there. We're very happy. And then what? 55 years later, they die or we die. Mm-hmm. Heartbreak.
Yeah.
So we can't escape the human condition. We think that we can reason and contrive our way into it. We're not going to be able to. So what I say is actually throw yourself into the experience in front of you. Show up to it. Yes, this ends. God, I have fallen in love across a coffee shop with people that lasted for 15 minutes. Oh my God. And then when she left me, 15 minutes later, I was heartbroken. And I think it's okay.
I think we're so trained to look at love as, can I love you forever? And if not, let me just turn this off.
Right.
You know, because again, we're afraid of the power and the enormity of love. We feel like it's foolish. We feel like it's like that like little girl in us, you know? But at the same time, think about all of the lovers that you could have had that could have taught you different things and brought you to different places, but you just said no.
I think that is one of the things that we have to give ourselves to, that the risk that is in front of me, while it may very well lead me to heartbreak, I'm still willing to choose it because the potential reward of even that moment of being seen and being known and being loved is worth it.
Yeah. That's what life is about.
If only for a moment, right? And life itself is momentary. You know, my youngest son, he's 10 years old and he's quite a good soccer player. And he's going to love that I'm telling this story. Straight out of the gate, they put him in and he scored 4 goals against an undefeated team. Oh, he was so proud, riding high, his golden red hair is, you know, bright in the sun, his green eyes are shimmering and he's jubilant. And then the coach pulls him out because we need equal play time for all the players. And the players who aren't quite as good, they come on the field and wouldn't you know it, the other team scores 6 goals. And I see my son's shoulders slouch and he says, "Put me in, coach, put me in." And it's the last couple of minutes of the game. And the coach looks at him and says, "All right, go in." And I tell you what, my son gets the ball, is racing down the field. He scores. Wow. And then the pitch, and he's got the ball again. Now he can tie it up. He can tie it up. And as he's running down that muddy field towards the other end, he jukes, he slides right, he twists left, and then he trips. Somebody's leg extends, and he falls flat in the mud. And I see him fall flat in the mud. I see that other kid take off the ball, and my son looks over at me, makes eye contact, and I mouth, "Play your heart out." Knowing he's going to lose now. Play your heart out. He gets up off the ground, tears streaming down his muddy face, and he heads after the ball. He doesn't make it in time. They score. They win. Someone else is carried out on someone else's shoulders, and he trudges back, and I hug him, and I say, you played your heart out. That's life. None of us win. None of us win. How did we play the game? Did you play your heart out?
And that's just, such a good metaphor of sometimes we look into relationships that didn't work and we shame ourselves. How was I in that relationship? How did I allow this thing to happen? But it's like, you played your heart out. You loved. Like no time you loved was ever wasted.
That's it. In fact, if you loved it all, you were one of the lucky ones. I mean, think about how often people describe themselves as lonely and isolated and alone. Love may not last forever, but I think every moment that love is there is an eternity. Yeah. Wrapped up in a couple of minutes, maybe. Love while you have that minute. You may never get that minute back. Play your heart out, right? There's something, can I read something?
Yes,
is that
please.
Okay? This is at the end of the introduction. My father was a minister, and I don't necessarily ascribe to any particular faith tradition, but, it's interesting because I think I was raised with some really beautiful stories that have impacted and continued to gain a foothold in my thought life. And I end this particular introduction with this set of thoughts. At times, we may have given up believing that we are even worthy of arms opened so widely, or a love whose hands are outstretched. We imagine that love should pass us by. The voices of judgment and unworthiness become so loud that we believe they're our own. Sometimes we think the best we can do is put our heads down, grit our teeth, and make it. The world becomes a silent witness to our loneliness, and love takes on a heroic quality of someone else, elsewhere. Here my mind goes to a story I heard often as a child from my father's pulpit. Jesus is on one shoreline as an exhausted group of disciples struggled in their boats rowing against the wind. They'd fished all night and caught nothing. He invites them to simply cast their nets on the opposite side. The empty strands are suddenly filled with fish, and in that moment, one disciple sees Jesus on the shore and dives out of the boat and swims to embrace him. What a brave act. Think of it, mundane living, repetitive, hopeless, exhausted, and then came an invitation from a person to try something new, a shift, a sudden awakening. The cold air of the morning is interrupted, a harvest where there had been none, miraculous. But the miracle in this story isn't food. It is of a desperate man in a boat, leaping forward out of safety into the murky waters towards the one he loved. He could have drowned, but he didn't. Love held him. Real love does that, doesn't it? It holds us. It holds on to us because the truth is that after so many years of loneliness and heartache and struggle, it's simply not interesting to be alone anymore. You want to love and be loved. You want to be wrapped up in everything waiting for you on the shore, and you're willing to brave the cold waters, the unforgiving current, and any degree of darkness just to be enfolded in the arms you believe will hold you. You're willing to endure the temporariness, the pettiness, the grief of every little death that life contains. You're ready for something deeper, something more. That's the miracle, one of faith, one of hope, one of love. And I think that's really everything that I want to say, that jump out of the boat. Yeah. Towards that which is waiting for you on the shore.
Yeah, so beautifully said of like, the mundaneness of life. And then all of a sudden there's the harvest and it's love. It's this like glimmer, this potential to feel something more. And that's why every song and every movie is about it. And it's a drug. It's like the natural psychedelic experience that's like built into us. And there's a reason why, you know? But I feel that this construct of like marriage and responsibility and roles has like, I can't say destroyed love, but diluted it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that now love has become this like decision. It's like, oh my God, this like hot potato I have in my hands of love. Where do I throw it? Let me find the richest, most successful person, put it over there. It's not really fitting, but let me try, you know? Yeah. Because if I just fully loved who I wanted to, maybe I would love the homeless Rasta guy on the side of the street and then that would be my life.
Well, and then what? Then mother really wouldn't be impressed.
Yeah, but I'd have some great dreadlocks. Yeah. So how can we like love and relationship? Mm-hmm. Can they go together?
Mm-hmm. And didn't Frank Sinatra say that? Love and marriage, right? Yeah. I mean, that is the question, but I love what you're saying because the truth is that rightly understood, if I allowed myself to truly love, to give myself to that experience, I might find myself in the most unexpected of places.
Sometimes I'm like, no, I can't have a crush on this person. No, this is not allowed. And then you like stop yourself.
Right. And who gave us those rules? Yeah. And who said those rules ever lead to happiness? I think that's one of the most interesting things about our modern society is that we keep on playing games that we did not create with rules that we did not make or even consent to, and aren't even making them, the game players and the rule makers, happy. Isn't that interesting? That actually like our beliefs about love or our beliefs about what relationships should be, which condition us to choose or even to see the person in front of us, they're rarely working. But we keep playing the same games over and over, hoping it will get us to someplace that hasn't really gotten too many people. I think we have to be willing to doubt, take the radical statement and step of, I doubt that which does not feel loving to me. I doubt that which does not actually hold as my best interest, that which makes me feel the most love. I think we need to make love our North Star. And that feeling of, does this actually feel good to my nervous system? Does this feel easeful and kind? Yes, it's with the homeless Rastafarian, but my God, I've never felt my nervous system feel so settled.
And I think love has this intelligence because it gets us places that nothing else would have. That like, let's say my life path was to become a Rasta in Jamaica. Maybe it will be one day. That it's like, what a perfect plan that God would put in place of like, there's one, Cupid, hit her with the bow. And then it's almost like when you have a crush on someone, you're like obsessed with them and you want to know everything about them and you want to know where they're from and you want to know their interests. And it's like this like encyclopedia you can't stop reading in a way that nothing else really can. And that's why people like move across the world and make these radical decisions. But sometimes it was about you were actually meant to live in Jamaica. Yeah. You were actually meant to co-create this film. You were actually meant to do this thing, but only love would have been powerful enough to bring you there.
And again, we don't manifest love. We don't boss it around. It actually pushes us. And I would say love is so transformative because of that. Take the next step. You don't know where it takes you. All you can do is show up to that next thing, that next moment well. That's your job. We cannot plot out and plan out life. Listen, I think we've got to stop controlling life. Really interesting things happen when we stop trying to coerce and control life. Yeah, when we stop resisting reality as it is.
And I think like we've pathologized love so much that then when we do have this beautiful gift of love, we're like, why do I love this person? Is it my anxious attachment style? Is it my inner child? Is it my this? And then it's like, you had this gift and you just fucking tore it to shreds. It's like you had the brownie and now it's the wheat here and it's deconstructed, you know, and this doesn't taste so good anymore.
Yeah. You know, I learned a long time ago that I am capable of taking a car apart, but it usually doesn't run too well once I do. And I think a lot of us have decided we're going to take relationships apart, we're going to look under the hood, but not too many of us are capable mechanics.
We do it because we're afraid of making the wrong decision.
Right. And again, we have this ideal or this perfect outcome of how it's got to be. Shed the perfect outcome. There's no perfect outcomes. You know, part of my dedication in this book was I wanted to show you a picture of what love actually is. not just the beautiful moments, but the ugly ones too. I didn't want to pathologize or prescribe or commentate on love. I wanted to put the mirror up and show you your experience without trying to make it good or bad or right or wrong, just what is. Wouldn't that be okay to love the human experience that much?
And I think that like your heart's going to be broken regardless, right? Whether you fall in love with the Casanova and it happens next week, whether you fall in love with the perfect guy with the secure job and it happens when you or him have an affair, or it happens when you marry the perfect, safe, soul flame, whatever guy, and one of you dies. It's going to happen. So just love.
Love, 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 and take the next step, whatever that next step is, knowing that you can't predict the 30th step or the 300th. Live this next moment well. You know, I want to be a lover. That is just my core truth. Like, I want to show up, and at the end, I don't want to be someone who's protesting very much. I don't want to be someone who's scared. I don't want to be a politician who's trying to control or gain votes. I don't want to be a fixer or a rescue. I just want to be a lover, someone who showed up and said, how can I give all of me to the goodwill of this person sitting next to me, whether they're my son or my father or my friend or my partner, or even you in this podcast moment? Like, how can I extend my well-being to yours in this moment?
A piece of advice that my friend Layla Martin gave me, and she's definitely a lover herself. And I'm like, how do you deal with dating apps and, you know, hookup culture and situationships and all of that? She's like, for the first 3 dates, I show up like the wife I want to be.
Oh, beautiful.
And she's like, I show up fully emotionally there, interacting how I would want to be in the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And if they can't meet me there after the 3rd date, then I end it. And it's so the opposite of how we are trained to be, of like, be mysterious, reciprocate how they are with you. So if they took 4 hours to respond, you take 4 hours. In fact, take double the amount of time, take 8 hours. And then it's like, and I love that advice. And I just started showing up that way of like, this is how I want to be. I want to be able to text you when I want. I want to be able to just share what I want. And if that's too much for someone, better to know sooner than later, and like coerce someone into this game. Then the moment you drop the game, they're gone. And there's the heartbreak that you were trying to avoid.
Years ago, I was teaching a class to a group of men, and I made the statement that authenticity is the foundation of relationship. And I had one particular young man who apparently had become very good at deceiving the people he was dating. And it didn't seem to end too well. They felt lied to, they felt cheated. And he always felt like he, was the victim of this, and that he wasn't getting the right kind of partner. And it just wasn't great. And I kind of kept on trying to hold the mirror to him and saying, the brutal, honest truth, which is, if you keep on being inauthentic with them, I think you're going to keep on having heartbreak happen in this particular way. Wouldn't it be better if you shared who you were and showed up as you were? He's like, well, what if they're not into the things I'm into, And I'm like, well, I can only imagine, but let's just play that out. So, you never share. And then, it's 25 years later, you're in a marriage and they don't know you, and they wake up one day and they're like, oh my God, he's been into this the whole time. And this doesn't end well. Well, he kind of ho-hummed about it, went his own way. And about 2 years later, I got an email from him just out of nowhere. It only had the headline on it. It said, you were right. It's a whole lot more fun when you show them who you are. I love that. First of all, I love being right. So that was fantastic. But I mean, that's just it. Can I show up as who I am from day one? Not playing the game. Oh my God. Quit playing the game.
Yeah. It's almost like love happens when you just drop your guard.
That's it. We think that we can erect walls and they'll keep us safe. First of all, you're still going to get hurt. Second of all, the walls that we build out of fear prevent the love we want.
And I think it's that fear of, let's say you were in a situation that was toxic, infidelity, abusive, that you're so afraid of ending up in that situation again. Yeah. And you do all this personal work to notice the red flags. And here's what I could have done differently. And why didn't I see this? So then you have all these walls, but it's also like wisdom. But I think it's just trusting that once you learn the lesson, you just don't learn it again.
Yeah. And you know what I want to say? I think that there, again, is a pathologizing of our past relationships. Mm-hmm. And we often say, oh God, that hurts so bad. quite wisely, we don't want to repeat it. I wonder if we could frame shift a little bit and say, and yet weren't those also your teachers? And yet didn't you also grow from that? And so isn't even the painful thing, the tragic thing, the thing that I would never want to repeat nor wish on anyone, isn't that also something that we gained? Is there any way to lose if love is our teacher? Right? So we might say, well, again, bad love though. Well, here's the deal. Life is a river flowing us towards that oceanic consciousness in the end, that great sea. I think that love is kind of like a series of life rafts that we latch onto as we go. And the reality is that we often want to hitch our rides to the yacht. But even bad relationships like driftwood get us further down the stream. So either way, keep going. Yes, there's bad love and there's better love. Don't repeat the same mistake, but know it still took you farther. You can actually be grateful to all of the teachers in this life, including the bad teachers.
And I find that once you learn a lesson, you can't unsee that thing. You're so afraid of what if I end up back in that situation, but that's the importance of the grief.
Yeah.
When you fully grieve that thing, when you go and you taste that rock bottom, once you can even feel that energy in another person, the love isn't really there anymore, and there's maybe different lessons and different flavors of heartbreak that you need in life. But I find that it does always get better and every love becomes truer because it's this newer version of you that's showing up. And it's also like oftentimes in relationship, it's like you remain energetically stuck at who you were when you entered the relationship. And then maybe you're with that person for 10 years. And then let's say you break up, you entered when you were 25, you break up when you're 35. Now I found for myself, I had to like go back to all those ages and relive them, like date what I would have dated as if I was 24, as if I was 25, as if I was 26, and learn those lessons that I wasn't dating. Did that happen to you?
Absolutely. I mean, and had to make up for a lot of lost time, I think, is one of the realities of that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, again, there's no way of bypassing the human experience. You and I were talking earlier. I thought relationships were my great shortcut out of development. Right. And so a relationship, whatever relationship it was, would get me out of whatever the set of choices I needed to make. So when I'm 18, it's like I probably need to grow up, be responsible. Great. I'm going to get married. This is the ultimate responsibility. She becomes the shortcut. Or later, when I needed to get out of the relationship, well, I couldn't do the hard work of being authentic and honest and naming what I actually needed. Instead, I needed a crowbar. Needed a relationship out. So I chose someone. Awful way to get out of something. I took a shortcut. And then later I met someone else. And instead of actually developing and growing in love, instead of actually choosing to develop who I was, another relationship. And we tend to substitute actual work for relationship.
Because being alone, I will say it's been the most confronting thing of my life. Someone who was in a 4-year relationship and a 7-year relationship, and now I've been single for over a year. And it's like, oh, I see why someone would want to jump into another relationship. It requires so much, just like, not just self-control, because definitely I haven't even been tempted. It's more just like that yearning, this deep yearning of like, wanting to merge, wanting to feel at home with someone, but knowing that if it's coming from that place, it's never going to be true.
Yeah, it actually won't be out of that deepest and grounded sense of self. And then you'll have to relearn that lesson.
Yep.
That thing that you avoided learning. I mean, listen, again, there's no bypassing. You're going to have to learn it at some point in time, and you will. But will the stakes be higher? Yes.
Yeah. Sometimes you can learn some lessons on your own. So then you're entering into the relationship from a higher octave. But I see a lot of people like 2 weeks out of their divorce, they're in another relationship, and you're just going to get off on that floor and just continue on with that lesson. But I have empathy. I understand why, because I think we're so disconnected culturally that we're all like living alone in our own apartments in our own cells that It's like, when you lose your primary person in your life, you lost your entire village.
Yeah.
So it is like, when I do feel those levels of like yearning or loneliness, I remind myself, I'm like, I have friends that pick me up from the airport. and like show up to travel with me, and I can talk to and voice note to. Like I have so much intimacy in my life in all of these different ways. And like we even romanticize that it only can come from romantic love. And it's like, I have found the truest loves in my life have been my friends.
Oh, they will outlast most of your romantic relationships anyway. I think we have to acknowledge that friendship is a relationship too, right? I love that what you're saying. Like I can create a web of meaningful connection and many kinds of loves, right? Platonic, familial, vocational, right? All of these different things. Our culture is one of the only cultures across history that has ever romanticized romance quite as much as we do. In fact, I think in the absence of a kind of a cultural sacred understanding, a cohesive understanding, we have made romance our God. And so romance becomes the new God, love becomes the new God. You know, therapists are the new priests and confessional. And, you know, it's like, I'm looking for a rescuer who will come in and absolve all my sins. Yeah. And so I'm waiting for the person to come in and show me, oh my God, you're okay. You're okay. You know, we're still looking for someone to save us rather than doing the deep work of actually saying, no. What you need to do is look in the mirror. So I went to Crete 2 years ago. This is such a funny story to me. Mainly because I get to do an accent. It won't be a great accent, but I'll make you endure it.
I don't
anyway.
know Cretan accents, so
oh, thank God.
You.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm making up my own here. So, you know, a gentleman and I met. He was older, and he took me out into the mountains. This is a real kind of guru moment. He was just an average guy, but I was having so many just incredible mind expanding moments with him because what he was saying had so much wisdom. And I asked him, I said, you know, like, tell me about your life. And so he did. And then he says, you know, in the towns that I go to, priests are my favorite people. And I go, oh, well, that's interesting. Why is that? And he says, well, because they confess to me. And I said, really? Why would they confess to you? He says, because priest has no one to confess to. So they talk to me. And so that was very interesting. And he says, well, what is it you do? And I said, well, I'm a coach and a writer. And he said, oh, how many books you write? And I said, well, I had written one at that time. And I said, well, one. He goes, that is accident. You write two, then it is actually a real profession. So that's why I basically had to write this second book just to impress him. And he said, but what do you do before that? I said, well, I used to be a therapist. And he said, oh, that is bullshit job. And I went, oh my God, you know, like, what do you mean? And he said, no, I don't mean disrespect. Like, we live in bullshit society. So we need these kind of professions. And I'm taking a little offense to it at that point in time, because this is my tribe still. And I say, well, what do you do instead? You don't go to priest, you don't go to therapist. What is it you do? You know, he looks at me and says, I look at mirror. I said, well, what do you mean? He says, well, truth is, we have hard time seeing ourselves. So my job is to look in mirror until I can look myself in the eye and say, I love you, and not look away scared. And when I can do that, the work is done and I go on about my day. And honestly, when I heard that, I was so blown away. So I tried it on the Delta flight back from Europe. And I'm in that tiny little bathroom, and I'm a big guy, and I'm sandwiched up against the mirror, and I'm like, I love you. And, he's not wrong. If you look yourself in the eye, it's very difficult to see something you like. You see all of your flaws. You see all of your traumas. You see all of your inadequacies, your insufficient childhood. You don't love yourself. But if you can hold your gaze and say, I love you, and you hold it there, the most amazing things begin to happen. You transform in front of your own eyes. Yeah. And this has been a really special thing to incorporate in my life. So I'm a little less bullshit, apparently.
So everyone's going to go find a mirror right now and say, I love you to themselves until they cannot look away or laugh or, make a joke of it. I think that's a really powerful practice. I know I'm going to do that after this conversation. So thank you so much I could talk to you for hours. I'm like, I just want to live in this realm of love and poetry and philosophy and grief and just be Socrates and Plato. Can we just bring that back? So thank you so much for living from your heart and, reminding us that, life can be so calculated. And I think that that's what love allows us to do, something that makes no fucking sense. And that's why we're so enamored and hungry and fascinated and scared of it.
All of it. As Hemingway said, the reason why we need heroes is because they're so hard to find.
Yeah.
And that's why we need love. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. And we'll link your book below so people can get that. And there's so many amazing stories in it. You write so beautifully. So I highly recommend it. So please share this episode. You know, sometimes I feel like it's awkward to talk about love. Like we're like, I don't want to come off as needy or something, especially when you're single. And I found like the more I share about love, the more I'm going to be a vibrational match for all the other lovers out there. And if they're not into love, we're not going to be a fit. So share your desire, your interest about love. Share this episode. Live with your heart more openly. Take some of these practices into your life, because if there's anything we need, it's a more loving world. And if you love this episode, please leave a review for it in the iTunes store, and I will send you a free gift of my womb meditation, which is a meditation that allows you to connect to your divine feminine source of wisdom. So all you got to do is leave a review on the iTunes store, take a screenshot, and send it over to me at sahara@IamSaharaRose.com. You can find that email and all of the links mentioned in the show notes. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.
Trust your intuition, trust your inner wisdom, trust your inner guidance. Close your eyes and listen. Surrender, let go. So trust your intuition, trust your inner wisdom, trust your inner guidance. Close your